I want to start today with a little experiment.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
So I want you, the listener, to think about the last conversation you had with a friend or a colleague. Maybe it was yesterday or, maybe just this morning. You exchanged the usual pleasantries, and then they asked you the big question.
The standard, how are you?
Exactly. How are you? And I am willing to bet money that the very first word that popped into your head wasn't fine. And it definitely wasn't relaxed.
No. If we look at the sources we've gathered for this, for the vast majority of professionals, the default answer is busy.
Right.
Or if they really want to drive the point home, they'll say crazy busy.
Crazy busy. It's become a reflex, hasn't it? It's almost like a greeting in itself now. How are you, swamped?
Yeah.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to our deep dive. We are looking into a really fascinating stack of articles and research on stress, workload, and this modern obsession we all seem to have with being completely overwhelmed.
Because the source material today suggests that this isn't just about having a lot to do, it's about something deeper. They call it the productivity trap.
The productivity trap. So our mission for this deep dive is to act as your guide to dismantling that trap. We're going to break down hustle culture, figure out the difference between actual work and just, busy work.
Which is a huge distinction.
Huge. And we're going to talk about how to reclaim your time without sacrificing your career standing, because we want to bring you the best takeaways from all these sources to help you navigate this.
And the core concept we need to start with is that the trap isn't the work itself. It's the mindset we've been sold. The sources argue we have culturally equated busyness with importance.
Yes.
If you aren't overwhelmed, if you aren't answering emails at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, the assumption is that you aren't essential. We wear burnout like a badge of honor.
Because it proves we matter, which is a pretty messed up way to measure self-worth, if we're being honest.
It really is. And the sources open with a concept called the illusion of productivity.
This part hit me hard. The text draws a very clear line between activity and achievement. Just because you are moving, just because your fingers are typing, doesn't mean you are getting anywhere.
Right. It points out an uncomfortable truth. Most of what we do during a workday doesn't actually move the needle on our long-term goals. The sources rely heavily on the Pareto principle here.
The 80-20 rule, I think most people have heard of that, but usually in sales or economics. How does it apply to our daily burnout?
Well, in this context, the principle suggests that 80% of your impactful results come from only 20% of your efforts.
Okay.
Which means the vast majority of what you do, the status meetings, the endless email chains, the adjusting fonts on a slide deck, that's the 80%. It's filler.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If 80% of what I do is filler and I just stop doing it?
You're worried you'll get fired.
Exactly. I'd be out the door.
Yeah.
I can't just tell my boss, hey, I'm only working Tuesdays now because that's my 20%.
No, you definitely shouldn't phrase it like that. But here's where the psychology gets really fascinating in the research. It argues that we cling to that 80% filler work because it feels safe.
Just safe.
Yeah. There is this deep-seated fear explored in the text. If we aren't busy, are we valuable? Imagine you finish your big project at 2 p.m. and you have an empty calendar until 5 p.m. What is the first thing you feel?
Panic. Absolute panic. I feel like I need to find something to do immediately before someone notices I'm not doing anything.
Exactly. You feel exposed. So we perform busyness. The source calls it theater work.
Theater work, wow.
We attend meetings where we don't say a single word just to be seen in the room. We answer emails within 30 seconds to show we are on top of it. We create this theater of activity because having open space feels dangerous.
It reminds me of one of the behaviors listed in the articles. It said something like, staying late to look committed, even when you're just doom scrolling or organizing your desktop icons.
That is the trap right there. You end up prioritizing the urgent over the important, the dings, the pings, the sudden hallway requests, and you fall into task switching. The source is very strict about this. Task switching destroys efficiency.
But I feel like we all think we're good multitaskers. I mean, I'm totally guilty of it. I'll be listening to a Zoom meeting, answering an email, and checking Slack all at the same time.
And physiologically, the research shows you are doing none of those things well.
Ouch.
Every time you switch contexts, there is a residue left in your brain. It takes time to refocus. If you switch every 3 minutes, your IQ effectively drops for that period. You are busy, yes, but you are cognitively impaired.
That is wild. So the fix, and obviously this is the hard part, is moving from maximizing output, just doing more things, to focusing on outcomes, doing the right things.
Yes. The source phrases it beautifully, doing less, but doing it well.
Which sounds great on a coffee mug, but it's hard to do when everything feels like it's on fire.
Right. And that brings us to a really important distinction the sources make. Because we need to talk about the difference between crunch time and crisis mode.
Let's get into that.
Yeah.
Because let's be real, sometimes work is just hard. Sometimes you just have a deadline.
Absolutely. The source isn't advocating for a fantasy world where we sit around drinking herbal tea all day and only work 2 hours. Deadlines are real. If you work in accounting, April is going to be a nightmare. That is a temporary crunch.
So how do we distinguish a normal temporary crunch from the toxic stuff?
It's all about the horizon. A temporary crunch has a clear end date. You know that after the product launch or after the quarter closes, the pressure lifts.
Right.
And usually in a healthy crunch, there is a sense of shared mission. You're all in the trenches together, and, this is the key part, there is recovery time afterward. You are appreciated for the extra effort.
Okay, so that's the healthy version of stress. What does unsustainable workload or a permanent crisis look like?
It looks like a treadmill that never stops and only gets faster. There is no end date. As soon as one crisis is solved, another one is manufactured immediately. It's essentially whack-a-mole management.
The text mentioned a specific red flag here regarding resources versus expectations, didn't it?
Yes, that's the biggest indicator. When expectations keep rising, say, management says we need 20% more growth, or we need this delivered faster, but resources stay the exact same, or they even get cut.
Like when you're doing the work of 2 people because someone quit and they just never replaced them.
Exactly.
There was an aha moment for me in the reading where it said, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, but if you've been in crunch mode for more than a few months, it's not crunch mode anymore, it's just how the organization operates.
That is such a powerful realization. It stops being a phase and starts being a structural failure. And if that's the case, working harder won't fix it.
Right, because working harder just hides the problem from management.
Exactly. The system begins to rely on you burning out just to keep the lights on.
So, if you are in that situation, or even if you're just trying to prevent yourself from getting there, you need to manage your time with a lot more agency. But this part made me laugh. The source explicitly forbids us from doing the one thing I always do when I feel overwhelmed.
Downloading a new productivity app.
Yes, no new apps.
I loved that section. It's a strict anti-app stance. No new apps, no complex color-coded systems. The source argues that we use these tools as a form of procrastination.
Oh, guilty.
We spend hours setting up the perfect Trello board or Notion template instead of actually doing the work.
It's productivity theater again. It feels like work, but it's really just planning. So if we aren't using apps, what are the actual tactical moves the sources recommend?
The first one is ruthless prioritization. You need to know your top 1 to 3 priorities for the day. And the quote they use here is vital. If everything is a priority, nothing is.
That's a line I wish I could just say to my boss. If everything is a priority, nothing is.
It forces a choice. You can't have 10 number 1 priorities. Once you have those top 3 things, you apply a technique called eat the frog.
Which is a classic time management concept. Basically, do the grossest, hardest thing first, right?
Right. Use your peak energy, which for most people is the morning, for the highest value, most difficult work. Don't waste that fresh brain power sorting through emails.
But email is where I live. The source suggests something called batching to handle that.
Because context switching is the enemy. Remember the brain residue.
Right, dropping my IQ.
Yeah. If you check email every 5 minutes, you never get into deep work. So batch it. Tell yourself you'll only do emails at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Group similar tasks together to maintain your cognitive momentum.
And then there's calendar defense.
If it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist. And this doesn't just mean meetings with other people. You need to block time for actual work.
So if I have a big strategy document to write,
You put a 2-hour block on your calendar for it. And you treat it as seriously as a meeting with your CEO. You don't just delete it because someone asks for a quick chat.
that leads right into meeting hygiene. The source basically gives you permission to be a bit ruthless here. Decline unnecessary ones. Ask for an agenda. Leave when your part is done.
It's about taking agency. You aren't just a passenger in your own workday.
But taking agency is scary, especially when it involves saying no to a superior. Which brings us to a huge part of the reading, the art of professional pushback.
This is where the rubber meets the road. Most people are terrified that saying no makes them look like a bad team player, so they just keep saying yes until they drown.
But the source gives us a specific script for this, and I want to walk through this clearly because I think the exact wording really matters. It's for when you are already at capacity and someone tries to give you more work.
The key here is to communicate your capacity without ever using the words "I can't." You want to make the trade-offs visible to the other person.
Okay, so the script is this. I'd like to help. Here's what I'm currently working on. And then you list your top projects. Then you say, if I take this new thing on, something else must be deprioritized. What would you like me to adjust?
Notice the absolute brilliance of that phrasing.
You aren't refusing the work at all.
No, you are presenting a math problem. You're saying, I have 40 hours. I currently have 50 hours of work on my plate. You want to add 5 more hours. Which 5 hours do we remove to make it fit?
It essentially forces the manager to do their actual job, which is prioritizing.
Exactly. And honestly, most managers don't know exactly what is on your plate at any given moment. They just throw tasks out there. By making your workload visible, you aren't complaining. You're giving them the data they need to make a strategic decision.
It completely changes the dynamic from you being a servant who just takes orders to you being a partner in the business.
Precisely.
Now, what about when we are the ones causing the bottleneck? The source talks about the psychology of delegation and this superhero complex we get.
Oh, we all do this. We think, I can do it faster myself, or I don't want to burden anyone else with this. But often, if we're honest, it's about control. We don't trust anyone else to do it exactly right.
Which brings us to the 80% rule. And this one hurt my feelings a little bit.
It's a game changer for perfectionists. The rule is, if someone else can do the task 80% as well as you can, delegate it, hand it off. That is considered a win.
80%. That sounds like giving someone a B- and being okay with it.
It's a passing grade because your 100% effort, your absolute best, should be reserved for the things only you can do. If you are polishing every single minor task to 100%, you are wasting your unique value.
That segues perfectly into the section on perfectionism. The source frames perfectionism in a way I hadn't really thought about before. It calls it a time thief.
It reframes perfectionism completely. It's not about having incredibly high standards. It's actually driven by fear.
Fear of judgment, fear of failure.
Exactly. And the math they show for the workload multiplier is terrifying.
Oh, the math was brutal. Walk us through that.
Okay, so if your perfectionism adds, say, 30% more time to every single task because you're double-checking things that don't matter, reformatting spreadsheets, agonizing over the wording of an internal email.
Which I definitely do.
Right. Then a standard 40-hour work week suddenly becomes a 52-hour work week. You are working an extra 12 hours a week, not to add any actual value to the company, but simply to manage your own anxiety.
That is sobering. So we really have to get comfortable with good enough.
We do. And to help with that, the sources bring up the Eisenhower matrix. It's a classic tool for deciding what actually gets your attention and what you let go of.
Let's break down the 4 quadrants of that matrix quickly for the listener.
Sure. So quadrant 1 is urgent and important. These are the real crises. A server goes down, a client is threatening to leave. You do these now.
Yeah, okay.
Quadrant 2 is important, but not urgent. This is the strategic work, long-term planning, relationship building, skill development. This is where true success happens, but it's the easiest stuff to neglect.
Because it's not actively screaming at you.
Exactly. Then there's quadrant 3, which is urgent, but not important. This is the danger zone.
Other people's emergencies.
Yes. Random emails, interruptions, pointless meetings. You want to delegate these or push back on them. And finally, quadrant 4 is not urgent and not important. Pure busy work. Doom scrolling, you just delete these.
So the goal is to spend as much time as possible in quadrant 2, right?
Yeah.
The strategic stuff.
Exactly. That's how you eventually get off the hamster wheel.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about managing the work itself. Now let's pivot to managing the human doing the work. The source has a great section on stress management that actually involves some physical resets.
Because stress is a physiological response in your body. You can't just think your way out of a cortisol spike when you're overwhelmed. The source suggests doing these quick desk resets.
One of them is box breathing. I've actually tried this before, big presentations. You breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4.
It works beautifully because it literally forces your nervous system to switch from that fight or flight mode back into rest and digest. And it only takes 2 minutes.
Another one mentioned was progressive muscle relaxation. Tensing and releasing muscle groups. But my absolute favorite and the hardest one was the do nothing break.
Which is so much harder than it sounds. The instruction is to just sit for 5 minutes. No phone, no podcast, no reading an article. just existing.
Honestly, it sounds terrifying.
That's because our brains are completely addicted to constant input. But your brain desperately needs that silence to reset and process information.
We also need to talk about boundaries outside of the office, because it doesn't end when we go home. The source talks about the massive problem of partial attention.
This might be one of the most damaging aspects of modern work culture. Because we all have our work emails and messaging apps on our phones, we are never fully at work and we are never fully at home.
Right. You're at dinner with your family, but you're checking Slack under the table.
Or you're sitting at your desk at work, but you're worrying about a personal text message. You are just half present everywhere you go.
It's this always-on culture. How do we actually break that without, again, ruining our careers?
You have to be aggressive with your boundaries, turn off the push notifications. But the most practical, actionable tip the source gave was about email scheduling.
Oh, this is such a good one.
If you are working late, which ideally you shouldn't be, but let's say you are, do not send that email at 10 p.m. Schedule it to send at 8 a.m. the next morning.
Why is that so critical?
Because if you send it at 10 p.m., you are actively training your team and your boss to expect you to be available at 10 p.m. You are teaching people how to treat you.
And you're also stressing them out because their phone suddenly dings at 10 p.m. and now they feel like they have to reply.
Exactly. You're spreading the panic. Also, use your autoresponder. Explicitly state, I check email between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. It feels really bold to do that, but people actually respect clarity.
It really all comes down to the fear of missing something, doesn't it? The source mentions the inevitable pushback people give. But what if there's an emergency?
And the reality check the source provides is that true emergencies are incredibly rare. If the building is literally burning down, someone is going to call your actual phone.
Right.
For almost everything else in the corporate world, it can wait until morning.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we have to address what happens if you don't do these things. Because the source lists the warning signs of chronic stress, and it's not pretty.
It's very serious. We're talking about constant, unexplainable fatigue, emotional numbness, dreading the workday the night before, withdrawing from your personal relationships, and physically it manifests as chronic headaches, severe sleep issues, digestive problems.
The text makes a very hard point here. If you have these symptoms, you aren't just having a stressful week. You are in a chronic crisis.
And the hard truth from the research is this: if the job is making you physically sick, and the job refuses to change its structural expectations, then the job must change. You have to leave. Your health is not negotiable.
That's the bottom line. And it's a really powerful place to leave it. We so often act like we have no choice, like we are just passive victims of our Outlook calendars. But this deep dive reminds us that we have way more agency than we think we do.
We do. We get to decide what an acceptable workload looks like for our own lives. It requires setting firm boundaries, and yes, that might be deeply uncomfortable at first, but you have to consider the alternative.
Right. There are absolutely consequences to setting boundaries. Maybe someone gets annoyed with you, maybe you miss out on a minor project, but there are much, much worse consequences to sacrificing your health. I want to leave you, the listener, with this final thought to mull over or explore on your own. It's something that really stuck with me from synthesizing all this material. Busyness is not a virtue. It is not a character trait. It is a state of being, and very often it's a choice. You are the only one who can draw the line. The company won't do it for you. A company will take as much as you are willing to give. So ask yourself today, if I did 20% less, but did the important stuff better, would the world end? Or would I just be happier? And if you do end up sacrificing everything for the job, remember this: you are sacrificing your health for a job that would likely replace you in a week if you were gone.
A provocative question, and definitely worth asking yourself.
Thanks for diving in with us. Take a breath, block out some calendar time for yourself, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.